Hello, I'm Sarah Kelly, and this is my persuasive speech. In 1776, the founding fathers of our great country risked everything, their families, their careers, and their lives, for our right to vote. In the 242 years since then, we have enjoyed our right to vote and have made great strides in suffrage for all. But in recent years, voter turnout has steadily decreased, and Americans are more apathetic than ever to our civic duty. Have you ever been dissatisfied with the results of an election? Have you ever wanted to make your voice heard? Voting is the only surefire way of making sure your voice is heard. In this speech, I will go through the various issues Americans face when going to the polls, what makes a difference in our elections, and what you can do to make your voice heard. Our right to vote is an integral part of our American identity, yet fewer and fewer Americans are going out and voting. When there is low voter turnout, people get elected who might not actually represent the people they're elected to serve. This leads to dominant minority, which means that the politicians currently representing their districts are elected because only those who support him or her are going out and voting. This is the danger of not voting. People who are unqualified or not indicative of their district could be elected and put in positions of power. Would you want someone randomly appointed as your congressperson? Because that's what it means to not vote. You are giving up your voice to the whim of the whole of your district, county, state, or nation. In my opinion, using your own voice will always be better than to rely on others. Like I said, many Americans stay at home on election day and rely on others to vote. This leads to a disparity in demographics. Using the U.S. Census Bureau's Voting Hot Reports from 2000 to 2016, we can see that the elderly outvote young voters ages 18 to 29 by close to 30% on average. Even more, voters over the age of 65 make up only 14.5% of the entire country's population, yet they consistently make up the greatest percentage of voters in every election. This can lead to a disproportionate representation and can cause that dominant minority I was talking about earlier. Something we have to take into account when talking about voting rights is voter suppression. Many laws exist solely to bar voters from using their voice. In some states, if the signature you give to the poll monitor does not match the one on your driver's license, your vote will not count. This is an example of voter suppression, which has been going on since the days of the Civil War, the Jim Crow era, and are still in existence today. According to Let America Vote, last year, Georgia adopted a law that exists in various variations throughout the country. This exact match law, as it's called, requires that everything on your voter registration matches exactly to the ID you show at the polling place. If one letter, number, or your signature varies even in the slightest, your vote will not count in the state of Georgia. Georgia has actually come under fire for this policy and for a few other voter suppression issues in the last few years. Let America Vote also tells us that since 2013, over 1.3 million Georgians have been purged from voter rolls due to inactivity in recent elections. This left almost 18% of the voting population of the state without proof of voter registration. And not only have they rescinded registrations, but the Associated Press has reported that 53,000 voter registration applications were stalled by the Secretary of State of Georgia this year. What's even more astonishing, almost 70% of those applications stalled belong to Black Georgians, who make up only 30% of the entire state's population. Another culprit of voter suppression is the state of Florida, as NBC News reports. As governor, Rick Scott placed many restrictions on voter registration and early voting. Scott rolled back the state's early voting period and in 2016 refused to extend voter registration due to natural disasters, which, as we all know, are a staple of Florida living. These restrictions made it much harder for Floridians to get to the polls, especially in the 2016 general election. Voter suppression causes a disproportionate representation and disenfranchises millions of people throughout our country. Now, all that sounds quite negative and really paints a dismal picture of our nation's voting system. I do have some good news, however. Since 2016, early voting dates have been extended in Florida, and this year, Floridians enjoyed 2 full weeks of early voting. In turn, the Florida Supervisor of Elections reported that voter turnout hit record numbers for a midterm election this November 6th. Florida also recently passed Amendment 4, which restores the right to vote to 1.2 million reformed felons in the state. These strides, while still just the tip of the iceberg in preventing voter suppression, have already made great impacts on voter turnout and have caused for a more representative democracy. So you see, your right to vote is not just a right, but a privilege. So many people in this country are either unable to use their voice or their voice is taken away from them by the government that is supposed to protect them. We cannot stand for this any longer, and everyone must use their right and their privilege of voting. And here's how to do it. Register to vote as soon as you can. The Department of Motor Vehicles website tells us that there are 3 ways to register. You can register online at registertovoteflorida.gov, by mailing your application to the Supervisor of Elections, or in person at any voter registration agency, an armed forces recruitment center, any public library, and of course, the DMV. Some states also allow you to pre-register at age 16, which has greatly increased the number of registered voters, according to the Census Bureau. Once you're done registering, you can wait for the election, or you can get out the vote, encourage others to register, or even campaign for your favorite candidate. Imagine a world where you like your congressperson, where you can trust them to make important decisions regarding the future of your district. Can you say that right now? Can you say that you trust your politician? When everyone votes, we have a fair, diverse, and representative democracy, one where those who are in power are like-minded with the people they represent and have their constituents' best interests at heart. These are the politicians you can trust. If you want to make sure that your voice is heard and that our democracy is a good representation of our nation, then use your right to vote.